What's good, Internet? I am the Angry Philosopher on Drugs. Been a couple of days longer than I would have liked between now and my last video, and for reasons I can only make an educated guess at. I have a terrible headache bordering on a migraine, but I remembered the videos and thought, screw it, I better do it now, so I'll just put it off for a couple more days, and then, well, the longer you leave something, the harder it is to get back to it. So here I am. Wanted to discuss the logic behind difficult questions. And by difficult questions, I mean sort of two things. Firstly is when you're being asked trick questions, like loaded questions, a question with an unspoken premise which you naturally affirm whether or not you respond with a yes or a no. And the second one is when you or someone is being asked a question about something bad they've said or done, or someone they're affiliated with has said and done, and they're just trying to avoid giving a position. So I kind of... this is good. I kind of... oh yeah, that's the We Bare Bears in the background, whatever. I want to draw a parallel between the sentence structure of any language really, and the structure of an answer. And by that I mean, whereas a sentence has a subject and a predicate, an answer to a difficult quote, any answer worth responding to, any answer that requires nuance will have the subject of yes and no, and the predicate, which is the explanation behind the yes or no, the nuances. So, heads up, both of the examples I'm going to bring are from stupid things said and done by members of the US Democratic Party. I'm positive people could give me similar examples by the Republicans or the Greens or the Independents. I'm not here to point fingers at a specific party. I'm drawing on recent, memorable, highly publicized events. So the first example is a loaded question. The most typical loaded question used as an example is, have you stopped beating your wife? This is used to describe the nature of an unspoken premise, which is someone has started beating his wife. Has he since stopped? If you say, yes, I've stopped beating my wife, the inference is, I was beating her and now I'm not. If you say no, the inference is, I've started beating her and I'm going to damn well keep at it. Wow, take that one out of context. Now, there is actually a correct answer to this, as most rational questions are. But again, the subject is yes or no, but without the predicate, there's a huge problem. So, for most reasonable people, let's go with, have you stopped beating your spouse? Because there are plenty of husbands out there getting beaten up as well. If someone were to ask me, have you stopped beating your wife? The correct answer would be, no. I have not stopped beating my wife, because in order to stop beating my wife, I must first start beating my wife. As I have not started beating my wife, I cannot have stopped beating my wife. Therefore, the answer is no. But as we looked at previously, if I simply said no, I could very well easily be made out to be some sort of moral monster. Now, the real-life application of this comes during the hearings of the now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now, his accuser, the alleged victim, Sue someone or other Ford, Blasey Ford, submitted to a polygraph test. And during the hearing of Justice Kavanaugh, the Democratic Senator Kamala Harris, who was previously I believe, a state prosecutor of some sort, asked the question, so Ms. Ford consented to a polygraph. Have you consented to a polygraph? Now, this seems like a straightforward answer, a straightforward question, but it's not. Now, Justice Kavanaugh attempted to explain why this wasn't a simple question, because as both he and Senator Harris knew, in most court hearings, or possibly all court hearings, because a polygraph can be beaten or at least influenced, and this came up in Miss Blasey Ford's past, polygraph tests are not admissible in court, or a majority of court cases. Not being a lawyer, I couldn't say exactly, I don't remember, and I'm too headachy to have researched that prior. But the point is, if Justice Kavanaugh said he hadn't taken a polygraph, if he said yes, he would be lying. But if he said no, he would create the image that he had something to hide by not taking the polygraph test. Now, he did attempt to explain this and ask why Senator Harris, being a prosecutor herself, would even ask such a question, knowing that it can't be used. And Senator Harris then, kept cutting him off with, it's a simple yes or no. So in this case, when you have someone asking you this difficult question and refusing to asking for this subject, yes or no, but refusing to allow for the predicate, you have someone who is probably dishonestly trying to attribute some sort of unspoken premise to you. In this case, it was that Justice Kavanaugh had something to hide. Now, in my opinion, I think Justice Kavanaugh could have handled that better, because the Senate chairman, I think the title was Republican. Was it Cocaine Mitch McConnell? And if I'd been sitting there, I'd have said something like, Mr. Chairman, this is actually a loaded question. With your permission, I would like to ask for clarification, etc., etc. And if Senator Harris said, it's just a simple yes or no question, I could say, well, it's not that simple to me. It may be that simple to you, but I, however, request permission, etc., etc. In Justice Kavanaugh's defense, I've not been paraded through the international media as like a ringleader of a gang rape sex gang. Understandably, Justice Kavanaugh's mind might not have been 100% on the game that day. Fair enough, he still came out vindicated, I believe, although a lot of people still believe he's guilty. So innocent till proven guilty, except if they still want you to be guilty, in which case you're still guilty because public opinion, etc., etc. Second example is the opposite. So Senator, now forgive my pronunciation, I've never actually heard this said out loud, Ilhan Omar, the Islamic congresswoman, part of the New Blood, has been publicly questioned / berated, etc., for comments she's made that, at least on the surface, appear very, very anti-Semitic. Now, a lot of media outlets have approached her Democratic fellows on this subject to say, do you or do you not disavow anti-Semitism and the comments made by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar? I'm going to be terrible if I've mispronounced that, but whatever. Now, this is an example of the reversal. They were happy to give this giant, long-ass predicate, but they would not be pinned down to a subject. By that, I mean they would say, well, anti-Semitism is just one form of hate. There are many forms of hate that are troubling the United States at the moment. And if you look over there on the right, and the Republicans and the conservatives, and the sort of hate they generate to all these other minority groups, etc., etc., everything they said had at least some basis in reality. They were trying to point to real-life circumstances. And I think it's fair to say there are some problems with hate in the Republican Party on the right with conservatives. I mean, it's just a law of averages, really. There are always going to be assholes in any large enough group of people, regardless of how they're characterized. Unless they're characterized by being assholes, in which case they're all assholes. But even then, there's probably going to be, by law of averages, that small minority that are like absolute assholes. But in this case, again, they were happy to give the predicate, but what they wouldn't do is be pinned down to a yes, we condemn this situation, or no, we don't. Again, simply because it's a lose-lose situation for them, in their opinion. If they say, no, we don't condemn anti-Semitism and these comments made by our newly instated senator, well, they come off as massive tools. They come across as hate mongers, etc. Yeah, fine, gas the Jews, whatever. Another one. Please don't take that snippet out of context. But if they said, yes, we do condemn this, then they're publicly being put in a position where they have publicly condemned one of their own. And, you know, if we look at all the stuff that Speaker Pelosi has said, oh, she has difficulty with words. Okay, no one who has difficulties with the primary language of a country should be governing that country if they don't understand the words used to govern and legislate that country. But moving on, I think everyone knows that she knows what she's saying in these tweets. Realistically, even being at its most generous, the question is just, what does she mean by what she says? Is she aware? Doesn't matter. The point, going back to the argument, is subject, predicate. Now, sum it all up, means if someone's asking you a question and they want a yes or no from you, but they won't allow the nuance, they won't allow that predicate, they are trying to attribute a position to you that you don't want to be in. Similarly, if you ask someone a question and they will give you a predicate but not the subject, not a yes or no, they are trying to avoid being put into a situation that they don't want to be in. There's a few fuzzy areas. I mean, if someone asks you a loaded question, you might want to try to give some nuance without saying yes or no in order to avoid that hidden premise. But honestly, the best thing to do in that situation is just to go, hey, this question implies this premise, and I don't agree with that premise. How about you ask me a better question, etc., etc. Just drag it out the open, kicking and screaming. Similarly, if someone's trying to avoid your question, you can go, look, I understand all of that. What I'm asking from you is, with all of this in mind, accepting all of this, do you or do you not? What you want to do is say, look, I understand this is a complex issue. I understand that there's a bunch of stuff to take into consideration beyond a simple yes or no, but we still need a yes or no, taking all of that extra stuff into account. I've been the angry philosopher on drugs. I am going to put on like a half blindfold or some shit and take some Panadol and go to sleep. See you next time.